A new large bat has appeared again in Malan, and this really surprises me, because from the current perspective, the size of this new Malan large bat is quite large. Up to now, it is still hard to judge whether it is a drone or not. From the current satellite images, the length of this aircraft can reach more than 22 meters, and its wingspan can also reach 43 meters. If we look carefully at this aircraft, it is a variant of the flying wing structure. Compared with the original Malan large bat, as well as the B-21 and B-2, its nose has a slightly protruding part, which is a bit like the layout of the original USX-47. Compared with the traditional flying wing structure, the biggest advantage of this layout is that it allows the fuselage to be made longer. The benefit of a longer fuselage is that the weapon bay can be made larger. For some equipment, such as radar and similar devices, if placed under the fuselage, they can be made more elongated. Some people previously said that this might be the Rainbow 7, but upon careful observation, this aircraft is actually quite different in appearance from the Rainbow 7. Although the Rainbow 7 has a considerable wingspan, the length of this new aircraft is significantly greater than that of the Rainbow 7. This photo exposed at the bottom right corner, we cannot be sure of its authenticity for now, but at least we can see that if the photo is real, it is obvious that this new Malan large bat is thicker than the Rainbow 7 and also thicker than several flying wing structure drones previously exposed by our country. Moreover, as mentioned just now, the length of the newly exposed Malan large bat can reach more than 22 meters, which actually makes it longer than the US B-2 and even longer than the US B-21. Currently, the length of the B-21 is approximately between 15 and 18 meters, while the B-2 is 21 meters. Its wingspan, however, is shorter than that of both the B-21 and B-2. The B-2 has a wingspan of about 50 meters, and the B-21's wingspan also reaches nearly 50 meters in width. The weight of the new Malan large bat is quite considerable. The maximum takeoff weight of the US B-2 is close to 200 tons, and that of the B-21 is around 100 tons. Therefore, the weight of the new Malan large bat is at least 80 tons. We can also see that its fuselage has a quite large thickness. Compared with the US B-21 that has undergone test flights, its fuselage seems even thicker. So, could this aircraft be the legendary H-20? Well, it's hard to say for now. Currently, we also don't know how many engines it has. If it has 2 engines, it may not be the H-20. If it has 4 engines, it could be the legendary H-20. This requires further exposure. However, it can be basically determined that the maximum takeoff weight of the new Malan large bat exceeds 80 tons, and its wingspan is also larger than that of the previous H-6. Previously, Shenyang Aircraft Corporation had a long-range attack plan, and the long-range attack aircraft at that time was a supersonic one. However, for the newly exposed Malan large bat, since its fuselage is much shorter relative to its wings, it is estimated that it does not have supersonic capability. If this aircraft is a replacement for the H-6, it can be basically judged that its range is much longer than that of the H-6. And because its fuselage is quite long, its weapon bay can also be relatively long. For example, the main weapon bay under the fuselage of the US B-21 is about 7.5 meters long, while the main weapon bay of the new Malan large bat can be made to exceed 10 meters. Therefore, it is very likely that it can internally carry the Jingli air-launched ballistic missile exposed in the 93 military parade. As for whether it has 2 weapon bays, it's hard to say either, but I think it might even have 2. This time, we also noticed that although the wingspan of the Malan large bat is smaller than that of the B-21 and B-2, its internal weapon bay may be larger than that of both the B-2 and B-21. Therefore, its range may be shorter than that of the B-2 and B-21. It is now said that the range of the B-21 exceeds that of the B-2, reaching more than 15000 kilometers. So, if this new Malan large bat serves as a new generation of medium-sized bombers in our country, its range should be around 10000 kilometers, and one of its roles is to replace the H-6. Currently, there are still several other possibilities for it. Another possibility is that we still don't know whether this new Malan large bat is a drone or a manned aircraft. However, in recent years, relevant papers from Northwestern Polytechnical University in China, specifically papers published in 2023, have mentioned domestic unmanned aerial tankers. So, could this aircraft be a new generation of stealth tankers in our country? Currently, this possibility seems quite high. I originally thought that the stealth performance of our country's new flying wing structure stealth tanker might not be pursued that much. In that case, there might be a compromise to simplify the flight control, just like what we saw before in many self-media platforms. And some magazines, the legendary H-20 was said to have foldable vertical tails. But now, it seems that this aircraft has no vertical tails. It is very likely that China's flight control technology has now reached a quite high level, so vertical tails are no longer needed, and its engines are also built into the aircraft. The advantage of this design is that its stealth performance will be better, but the disadvantage is that when the aircraft needs to replace its engines in the future, it will be necessary to develop specialized engines, and general-purpose engines cannot be used for replacement, because whether it is used as a bomber or a tanker, the service life of such aircraft is actually much longer than that of fighter jets. For example, it is quite normal for a bomber to be in service for 40 to 50 years easily. The US B-52 is even expected to serve for nearly 100 years. Most of Russia's Tu-95 were produced in the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds, and they are still in quite good condition now. As for tankers, their service life is even longer. The batch of US tankers now is already 70 to 80 years old. Under such circumstances, both bombers and tankers will go through an engine replacement process during their entire service life. Take engine replacement, for example. The US KC-135 tanker and B-52 were developed quite early, and they originally used turbojet engines. In the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds, with the emergence of turbofan engines, both the KC-135 and B-52 were refitted with turbofan engines, which also made the engines thicker. Both the KC-135 and B-52 adopt wing-mounted engines, which makes engine replacement easier. Even the KC-Z tanker that the US originally planned to develop had externally mounted engines. However, for the newly exposed Malan large bat this time, it can be basically determined that its engines are built in, so it will be relatively less convenient to replace the engines in the future. However, whether this aircraft is used as a bomber or a tanker, it is actually a very important aircraft for the 6th generation aircraft system. As we know, the 6th generation aircraft adopts penetrating air superiority, especially for aircraft with a huge range like the J-36. Even if it does not need to go to the front line to engage in air combat and only commands unmanned fighter jets to conduct air combat, it still needs to be about 500 kilometers away from the battlefield. If it goes deep into the enemy's rear area, it will actually need aerial refueling in case of emergencies. Therefore, when the US designed the stealth KC-Z tanker, it considered placing it relatively closer to the battlefield. From China's current perspective, if the newly exposed Malan large bat includes a tanker variant, it can penetrate deeper into the battlefield. If it is used as a large unmanned aircraft with a flying wing structure, it can actually be used very well in coordination with the J-36. As we know, the J-36 is essentially a fighter jet. Although its main weapon bay is relatively large, its depth is still limited, and the length of its main weapon bay is also restricted by the size of the fighter jet. If the main weapon bay of the new Malan large bat can exceed 10 meters, it is possible for the J-36 to control operational level ballistic missiles, such as the YJ-21 and YJ-19 exposed in this military parade, or cruise missiles with scramjet engines. In fact, we also know that for China's Air Force there is a plan to replace early warning aircraft in the future. In this case, an aircraft of such a large size can serve as a link in the future replacement of early warning aircraft. Besides having a large radar for detection functions, early warning aircraft also have a very important function, which is air command. If we use a flying wing structure aircraft as large as the H-20, around 200 tons, it would be a bit overqualified. However, an aircraft with a weight of around 80 to 100 tons, which is slightly larger than a Boeing 737, roughly the same size as a Boeing 757, and a bit smaller than a Boeing 767, is more than sufficient to serve as a battlefield command aircraft. This is because its size is already larger than that of China's current KJ-500 early warning aircraft. Because China has already achieved the separation of radar antennas and radar post-installation processing, both now and for the future. In this case, if we design a device like the WZ-9 that only carries a radar antenna without radar post-installation processing, its survivability on the battlefield will actually be inadvertently improved. Moreover, a diamond-shaped wing or rhombic wing structure, which is a type of flying wing structure, may become the next generation of the WZ-9 inches the future, equipped with a large antenna. It is also very possible that the radar backend is placed on the newly exposed Malan large bat, and the radar antenna is separated from the main aircraft by a distance of 50 to 100 kilometers from the Malan large bat. In this case, the survivability of air command will be greatly enhanced. This is one aspect. On the other hand, the newly exposed aircraft also has other functions. As we know, the biggest advantage of the flying wing structure is its high lift-to-drag ratio, which gives it a relatively long range. If it weighs around 80 to 100 tons, even up to 150 tons, besides serving as an air command aircraft, it is also very suitable to be used as a long-range electronic jammer. The U.S. originally modified B-52 and C-130 aircraft into long-range electronic jammers. The C-130 is an aircraft with a maximum takeoff weight of about 80 tons. The U.S. new long-range jammer is the EA-37B, whose Gulfstream platform has a maximum takeoff weight even larger than that of China's ARJ-21, now renamed C-909. The maximum takeoff weight of the Gulfstream G550 is approximately more than 50 tons. Therefore, this platform is actually very suitable for developing electronic jammer platforms, similar to the several Y-9 modified ones in China. The U.S. also has long-range battlefield reconnaissance aircraft modified from Boeing 707, which has a maximum takeoff weight of approximately 150 tons. Currently, due to aircraft platform limitations in China, the Y-20 is too large. We mainly use the Y-9 platform for modifications. In the future, it will actually be very suitable to use the newly exposed Malan large bat for such modifications. Therefore, we can see that both the EA-37B and EC-135, whether they are electronic jammers or electronic reconnaissance aircraft, are equipped with long strip-shaped electronic antennas. The previously exposed flying wing structure aircraft, including the US B-21 and B-2, are not very suitable for arranging such long strip-shaped antennas. However, the newly exposed Malan large bat obviously has an elongated fuselage with a protruding part. In this case, it is easier to arrange conformal antennas on the fuselage of this aircraft compared to the original Malan large bat or aircraft like the B-2 and B-21. Moreover, this platform is also very suitable for being modified into an anti-submarine aircraft similar to the P-8 Amperes in the future. Compared with the P-8 Amperes, its biggest advantages are its longer range and battlefield stealth capability. The P-8 Amperes cannot conduct offensive anti-submarine operations and can only undertake anti-submarine tasks in the second line. However, if the new Malan large bat is modified into an anti-submarine aircraft, it can conduct offensive anti-submarine operations by flying in non-formation with appropriate protection from stealth unmanned fighter jets around it. Alternatively, after weakening the enemy's frontline aviation forces to a certain extent, it can directly enter the frontline battlefield and drop sonobuoys. It does not necessarily need to sink the enemy's submarines. As long as it drops sonobuoys during such offensive operations, it will actually greatly restrict the mobility and operational range of the enemy's submarines. If a signal is indeed detected, anti-submarine operations can be carried out against the enemy from the rear, using long-range ballistic missiles, specifically rocket-boosted anti-submarine missiles. Even if it misses, it can still scare the enemy half to death and greatly restrict the movement of the enemy's submarines. Originally, when the enemy's submarines have not yet entered the battlefield, they are actually in the transit range and were quite relaxed. In this case, the enemy's submarines will become very tense during transit, which will greatly reduce their operational efficiency on the battlefield. Additionally, in the future, when coordinating with various unmanned underwater vehicles, including unexposed ones that we saw in the 93 military parade, the deployment of the new Malan large bat as an offensive anti-submarine aircraft will actually bring about a very significant and revolutionary change to such aerial anti-submarine operations. This is my judgment on the exposure of this Malan large bat. It is likely to be used as a bomber, a tanker, an air command aircraft, and in the future as an electronic warfare aircraft, an electronic reconnaissance aircraft, and an anti-submarine aircraft. Currently, this platform seems very suitable to be a multifunctional platform. It may even be a shared platform for both manned and unmanned operations. Whether to use a manned or unmanned mode depends on the specific task to be performed. Anyway, this aircraft is completely beyond my expectation. Because for the previously exposed Malan large bat and the drones exposed in this 93 military parade, I had a rough outline of guesses after hearing discussions from experts before, which did not go beyond my imagination. However, the appearance of this new Malan large bat has basically turned me from a military enthusiast into a layman in military affairs. It is somewhat beyond my imagination.